They start the recording. Welcome everyone to FWG 5, Day 2. Over to you, co-chairs.
Great, thank you, Coco, and respectful greetings, colleagues, and welcome to the second day of FWG 5. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, where I'm based on the traditional lands of the Algonquin people in Ottawa, Canada. It's morning, and I hope you're all doing well as we start this day. I thought I'd just begin with summarizing a couple reflections on how yesterday unfolded for those who might have missed, as well as just kind of introduce the agenda for the day, and then we'll get right into our review of the different work plan activities. So on day one, we began with, I think, a really important high-level reflection on the work plan and on our work thus far as the FWG. I think we heard a lot of valuable inputs on the importance of ensuring that we don't just pay lip service to Indigenous people's rights, but actually implement them in the work plan. I think we also heard the important point that in the next work plan, to the extent possible, we design the activities with the objective of having ground level impacts that meaningfully impact in a positive way Indigenous communities that we work with. And I think we also heard some views saying that we need to strengthen the impacts the FWG can have in other areas under the UNFCCC agenda, including through collaboration with other constituted bodies. And I think Andrea, who summarized it quite well, and she sent that out to other FWG members. So FWG members, I'd encourage you to review that as we begin our reflections tomorrow on the next work plan. And then we also began with a specific review of activities under the initial 2-year work plan, including activities 4 and 5. Daly gave a very comprehensive presentation about the webinars that she and I co-chaired, as well as Jane and Joseph giving a good overview of our outreach and dissemination plan, which I think will serve us well going in the future. I think we heard some valuable feedback on co-production of knowledge and different ways of knowing, and I think we'll have some follow-up to do in that respect. And then I think we also had a good contributors discussion where we had a good exchange on the terminology around nature-based solutions and some of the challenges and pitfalls associated with these new terminologies, and kind of began a discussion to consider how the FWG can reframe these narratives to better reflect Indigenous views and really reflect the on-the-ground realities. So I thought that was a really good discussion. In terms of today, my co-chair Hindu and I discussed, and I want to stress that our priority today is to ensure that we leave enough time at the end to have another rich and robust discussion from contributors watching and observing. So colleagues, I would ask you as FWG members to be brief in your comments on the activities as we discussed them, especially those activities that are nearly approved or have been discussed previously. Of course, if there's pressing concerns, please feel free to raise them, but otherwise, I would just ask that we stick on schedules in order to create that space for contributors and those watching to provide their feedback. So with that, I think I'll introduce the agenda in terms of focusing on the rest of the activities of the current work program. We have a lot to get through today, so without any further ado, I'd ask my co-chair Hindu to offer any remarks she might have, and also introduce activity 10, which she has, and then call upon Alec to introduce activity 10.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Thomas and everyone. I think I'm not going to lose time because today time is very precious. As Tom said at the beginning, we wanted to hear from all the observer contributors who are there. So I just leave you the floor to give to Alec. Thank you.
Thank you, Hindu. Alec, over to you.
Thank you, co-chairs, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. It's 4 p.m. here in Lusaka, Zambia, and warm greetings from Zambia. So I call it activity 4, and I'm just briefly going to give highlights of what has happened on this activity. So activity 10 called for parties, Indigenous peoples, local communities, and others to report annually through submissions on the implementation of the good practices for Indigenous peoples and local communities' participation in national climate change, national climate policy. So as part of deliverables, 2 calls for submissions were launched. The response to the first call was presented at FWG 3. For the second call, no responses were received by the deadline of 31st March. And recently, during the SB meetings, we had an in-session dialogue, which was held virtually on 3rd June. And at this in-session dialogue, we had representatives from parties and organizations that made submissions who were invited to speak to those submissions. The Indigenous FWG representatives from Asia and Africa also did contribute during the in-session dialogue. We also received anonymous input from participants who were selected or which was collected using Mentimeter. This is an interactive presentation software. We got good feedback, using this software during the in-session dialogue. So a summary document compiling information from the submissions has been revised to include the additional input that was shared during the in-session dialogue. And this will be distributed to the FWG to review and approve by end of next month, July 30th. The submissions and the contributions to the in-session dialogue emphasize that self-determination and rights of Indigenous peoples are actually essential principles for engagement in national climate policy. Challenges with implementation, lack of disaggregated data, as well as language barriers were identified as having a significant impact on full and effective participation by Indigenous and local peoples. So as a suggestion to the Secretariat, participants remarked that the submission process could be made much more accessible and easier to use so as to encourage more input. This activity was one of the main in the initial LCIPP work plan, with some elements of focus on national and regional levels. And in our next work plan, there may be needs or opportunities to cluster such activities together in order to streamline our work. So this is just a suggestion going forward as we develop the next work plan. I end here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alec, and thank you for that overview. I agree. I think, looking at innovative ways to maybe move beyond submissions to make it more accessible to provide input is definitely something to consider for the next work plan, and also take note of your remarks to maybe cluster this activity with others in a future work plan. So I'd open it up to other FWG members in case there are any reflections or views that they'd like to offer. I see Andrea. Please go ahead. Hi, Andrea.
Thank you, and very good morning to everybody. It's morning here in the beautiful Sonora Desert of Arizona. I just wanted to express my appreciation and congratulations to Alex and the other co-leads. I thought the workshop was excellent. I was very inspired by it, and I also reflected on a larger issue that we've discussed in the caucus and in our region about what is the role of the Facilitative Working Group and what is the platform itself. And I thought this was a really good example because we helped to organize that, but the activity itself to me was a function of the platform in the exchange of knowledge and views that were expressed, the support, as Alex said, for an Indigenous rights-based perspective and the importance of that kind of participation in national dialogues. And I liked that it had Indigenous peoples and state representatives as well, sharing what impact this could actually have. So it really helped for me to crystallize my thoughts about what is our role as the Facilitative Working Group and what actually is the platform as we provide these opportunities for exchange of views and good practices. So I want to congratulate you and say I learned a lot by participating and listening in on the workshop, and I hope we can do more such exchanges. I felt the same for the activities described in activity 4 as well, is provide those opportunities for exchange and advancing of understanding and incorporation of rights. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea, and yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I thought it was a great event, and thank you, Alec, for your co-leadership and to all those who contributed. Any other requests for the floor? I'm not seeing any, so I think we'll move on to the next activity, which is activity 9, I believe, which is concerns the engagement of Indigenous peoples in local communities and UNFCCC policies, actions, and communications. And it's being co-led and introduced by my co-facilitator, Hindu. So Hindu, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, co-chair, and I want to firstly to thank Alec, who is also one of the co-lead of this activity 9, and that's why we shared the presentations of this role. So activity 9, it's already completed. It's the one who completed among others. So that's also joining what Thomas said. Maybe we don't need to discuss a lot on this. And may I request Secretariat to just to put one of the slide up, and that can show all what we achieve on this activity, please. To do not also lose time, so activity 9 is about mapping existing policies, action and communication under the convention, including the national determined contribution, the national adaptation plans, and other relevant policies and communication, as well as through the submission, survey, and all. So as you can see here in the screen shared by the Secretariat, so the numbers of survey that we got more higher than the submission, and we mapped over 500 documents that give some of the result. You can all read with me in the screen, and you can also find all the rest of the information in the link of the UNFCCC. So the first thing we did is to develop a comprehensive inventory that would enable Indigenous peoples and local communities to further actively contribute to the climate change adaptation and mitigations, and that come from all the policies that we analyze. And second is to increase an opportunity to parties and non-party stakeholders to learn from best practices and enhance collaborative actions and support to Indigenous peoples and local communities regarding all those policies and implementation of actions. And thirdly, it's to encourage the integration of Indigenous peoples and local communities' traditional knowledge, skill, and culture practices governed by their customary and institutions with the unique positive value for climate change resilience and Indigenous peoples' rights in all the relevant policies, action, communications under the conventions. So the result, as you see here, it was around the mapping that already done during the FWG 4, that was the last one, in a technical paper and a data set that is already shared also in the website. So in addition, we have a recommendation from this activity where we'll put forward into the implementation of the activity 6, which my colleague will speak about it later in this morning. And so this mapping, it's a mandate, all is delivered and all is completed, and you can get all the materials. So I hope that Alec, I, and all the Facilitative Working Group members are very proud about these activities already completed. And we really wish that the countries, my take the recommendation in order to implement the needs of indigenous peoples, because when we see only 29 countries that implement the indigenous peoples knowledge or value, it is very, very weak. And when you see in all the results, I mean, 5 of them, we highlight the point where we need to get implement. So if for the next work plan can integrate those recommendations and can make it a continuous way, it will be very appreciated in order to help indigenous peoples to participate into action policies for implementation. Thank you so much, Co-Chair. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Hindu. Really comprehensive presentation. And I think, you know, as you pointed out, the difference between survey responses and submissions is quite stark, and I think a useful reflection for us as we design our next work plan. Could I ask the Secretary to please stop sharing the screen at this point? Thank you. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to FWG members to see if they have any comments or remarks on the activity. I'm not seeing any. Oh, Pasang.
Yeah, thank you, Hindu and Ali, for your excellent presentation. I just have a question, very short question. I think the survey of important activity 9 already shows the low level of engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities in the policies, strategic engagement at the national level. As you said, like 29 countries have implemented indigenous knowledge and values and presented with weak reports. So could you please clarify on this one? That means out of the whole total member state parties of the conventions, only 29 are found who are implementing knowledge system. I would appreciate if you could, clarify on this part. Thank you.
Sure. Hindu, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I give a comment, and I don't know if Chad wanted also to come in. We did the analysis of the more than 500 documents together, and also Alec, of course. So when we say 29, it's not implementing, it is mentioning. Because when we do the analysis, we have an Excel document with all the policies around the NAPs, NAPAs, NAMAs, national communication, all the climate policies at the different national level that was included in this database. And when it was analyzed with a wording that we put indigenous peoples, local people, so all this wording, when we cross them into the data, so we found 29 countries that mention it indigenous peoples. So it is not implementing because anyway, like the Paris Agreement is going to the implementation now. So some of them, of course, maybe dive a bit deeper on it, and some of them are only mention it. So that was the reason we highlight the 29. So when you go to the human rights, as also CL helped it, as there was only some number of the countries highlighted the human rights or others in gender. So we did some kind of this work. So I don't know if Chad or Alec wanted to come in if my explanation is not clear enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Hindu. Chad or Alec, would you like to add anything?
Thank you, co-chairs. I think Hindu explained it well. Passant la ref, it wasn't clear. We're happy to elaborate, but I think Hindu addressed it well. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Chad. Any other further questions or comments or remarks?
Yeah, Thomas, just to have a clarification. So as it says, like 255 survey are responded. Can we, like 29 countries who have mentioned the indigenous people in their climate change policy documents. So is there any kind of indication, out of how many countries. We have come to come to the fact that out of how many countries, 29 countries mentioned IP's issues. That means out of 197 who are member state of the UNCCC, that the remaining have not, or have we not? Out of how many? 29. And that would be great if you could clarify, just to have a thoughts on this one. Thank you. Thank you, Chad, for your, would appreciate if you could highlight on this part. Yeah.
Thank you, Pasanla. If co-chairs, if I may. So Pasanla, the data that Hindu presented, it reflects the review of a 572 document, which include, as Hindu mentioned, nationally determined contributions, national adaptation plans, the biannual reports of developed countries. So it reflects a series of documents, as well as the survey responses. We have put together a data set to capture all of those. That is available. I'm happy to send you a link that provide more details. However, the countries mentioned, it only reflect what is being reviewed. That doesn't mean there may be practices or policies that beyond the scope of this mapping. So it does not mean that that is the limit the number of countries are addressing, but seeing what the scope of this mapping has captured. And I'm happy to share with you the data set and address any additional questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Any further questions or comments? Andrea?
Thank you. Thanks. I think that this activity, of course, it was a monumental piece of work and carried out very well. And it's a good example of the kind of compilation that was included, I think, in the first work plan that maybe seemed like busy work, or, what does this have to do with the real issues? But I don't feel that way looking at the results, because what we can do is utilize this to show the gaps, that we actually studied them. We're not just saying, oh, Indigenous peoples aren't being included, their rights aren't being respected, etc. We now have a database to formulate our new activities that we talked about, those priorities yesterday, including the inclusion of Indigenous peoples in national policies, impact on the ground, respect for rights, etc. So now we have a basis to say in our new work plan, well, this is why, these are the gaps, and we actually studied them and we compiled them. And now we can go on to say, okay, what activity do we propose that can actually address those gaps in a real way? So I just want to congratulate you. And I think our tendency, even in the caucus discussions, was to say, well, all these things, what do they have to do with anything? They're just studies, they're just, on paper. But now we have a basis that we can present to the states and the COP to say, this is why we need this activity in our work plan to address these gaps. So I think it's very important. I've shifted my perspective a little bit about the importance of some of these activities, looking on the long view of what impact we can make through this body. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. And yeah, I really agree with those sentiments as well. I think, just to use my prerogative as co-chair, I think one of the forward-looking activities that we can maybe look at is taking some of the, at least where there are good practices, and trying to use this mapping activity to engage some of those partner groups like the NDC partnership that build capacity to do NDCs, and make sure that they're also aware of Indigenous people's perspectives and voices, and the need for them to be included in NDCs. And we can kind of hold up this mapping exercise to say this is a big gap that needs to be addressed. That's just one idea from my side, but I agree with you that it's a really important exercise, and congratulations, Hindu and Alec, on this important work, and thank you to the Secretariat as well. Are there any other comments or reflections on this activity? I'm not seeing anything further. Before moving on to the next activity, I understand that Kenneth Deere has had his hand up for quite some time. I'm sorry, Kenneth, I did not see it until quite a bit later, but if you would like to take the floor, please feel free to jump in now. I know we might have passed the appropriate time, but I would ask the secretary to enable your microphone and give you the floor if you'd like to speak. Chad, is it possible?
I'm sorry. It was. I guess I accidentally put the my hand up. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem, Kenneth. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure you had the chance to speak if you wanted. So without further ado, then I will move to the next activity, which is activity 11, which was about mapping existing funding in the UN system, as well as additional funding opportunities.
Maybe before you move, may I propose to the members in this activity 9? So for this activity 9, for moving forward, and thank you all of you for your contributions from the contributors and from the Facilitative Working Group member, may we just to consider updating the mapping result as all the new NDCs and NAPs, as well as many other relevant policies and action and communication becoming available. Is that agreeable by all the members, and then the secretariat can take note? Thank you. So,
Wait. I have a response to your question.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm wondering what the timeline would that be for that? Would that be included in this work plan to update the mapping since you have concluded with what you had? But would this be before the end of the year, or would this be? Are you proposing that it be included in the new work plan, Hindu? Before I respond, I just wanted to see what you meant. Thank you.
Maybe you also have his hand before that we can respond to all.
Thank you. I'm very happy to announce that my question was exactly the same one as Andrea's. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I think there are many NAPs and NDCs that are going to be updated even by the COP, because this is the timeline for the NDCs to get updated. So the new NDCs are already come. So these activities is completed, but it's not mean that like we can just leave it like that. So while we are having a new work plan, we can have a mention, maybe the new work plan can have it for the next coming 3 years, but for those who are already updated, so Secretariat have access, and even we also have access to all those data. So if you all agree, we can get those results, and just so it could be like an additional result to this activity. So this is my understanding. Then I don't know if Chad or Coco, you want also to maybe to tell us if that is possible or not. If we can consider this point, so I think that might be helpful to be in the second work plan, at least that can be adopted in that COP. Coco, do you want to come in? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. For as everyone is reviewing, as the FWG is reviewing the activities of the current initial 2-year work plan, for those elements that would be useful to build upon for the next work plan, mention it, seek consensus among FWG members, and then the secretary will be recording both your discussion as well as the decisions. So absolutely, if the FWG wishes to move one or the other element and recommend that be included in the draft second 3-year work plan, then absolutely we'll take note of that and include that in the draft for all of you to consider. Was that clear? Okay.
Andrea, are you happy with the answer? Because I'm seeing your hand up again. You are muted.
I'm happy with everything, but I just wanted a additional clarification. So we're not talking about creating an annex to this report this year. We're talking about moving this to continuing to compile results in the next work plan is the proposal.
Correct.
So that would have been then from the co-leads already included, or maybe it needs to be included in the form that we all filled out. That will be at the basis of our consideration of the next work plan. That can be added, or maybe it was already added by you when you responded to the form. Okay.
No, we can't take the decision without your consensus. That's why we ask it. So you completely right on this. It's correct all what you said. So if you all agree, so then Secretary can take a note and we can add it in this work plan that can be adopted in the COP, at the COP. Sorry.
Okay, I think it can be added in the form that is all of our proposals at this point for the new work plan. But I agree with it being added, and I think it's important to keep compiling these, to also to be able to assess what progress we're making in our inputs. So this will be a good benchmark. Well, this is where we were in the first 2 years, but after 2 more years, look how it's increased, something like that. It's a good database, I think, and I agree with it being added into the proposals for the new work plan in each activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Hindu and Andrea. I think that sounds like a good way forward. We'll make sure it's reflected in that document, and which we'll consider over the next 2 days as well, and we can discuss it further at that time. So moving to activity 11, which is a mapping exercise of existing funding in the UN system for the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities. I believe it's been co-led by Irina and Rodion, and we will now give the floor to Rodion, who I believe will be speaking on behalf of both of them to give us an update on that activity.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks so much. I believe that Irina will deliver our report. Irina, are you here with us? Could you confirm?
Yes, yes. Hi, Rodion. I
Yes.
thought that there was some misunderstanding behind scenes,
yes.
but yes, it was
Yeah.
supposed that I have to deliver this one. Okay, this activity we have already completed. Thank you, Chad, for bringing this slide for us. This activity is founded in the adequate funding to enable the function of the LCIPP as a guiding principle of the LCIPP. Activity 11 mapped existing funding within the UN system and additional funding opportunities for the participation of Indigenous people and local communities from all the regions related to climate change as part of this activity. In this way, we mapped the contributions of existing funding opportunities by geography and theme, as well as different levels. We reported the result in a synthesis document. This synthesis document is completed and is already hanged it's an online tool. This online tool compiles relevant resources and make them easily accessible through the dedicated LCIPP web portal. The first installment of mapping efforts under this initial 2-year work plan of LCIPP is now completed, as I tell you. The mapping has identified some common elements, as you can see in the screen, that can serve as avenues to enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the context of climate finance. These common elements include the development and implementation of safeguards policies, the appointment of designated program specialists, and development of indigenous advisory groups inside these institutions. Also, Activity 11 contributed recommendations through the Activity 6 of the work plan to invite relevant financial entities to enhance financial support for the participation of Indigenous people and local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under and outside the convention. Also, develop specific financial tools and mechanisms to provide support for projects led by Indigenous people to protect knowledge systems and cultural practice of Indigenous peoples and local communities which contribute to climate mitigation and adaptation. And also engage representatives of the FWG and Indigenous experts in relevant events and proceedings of the entities and disseminate information, including calls for proposals and projects templates via LCIPP dedicated web portal. Moving forward with this activity, the FWG may consider convening virtual dialogues to facilitate interactions between Indigenous people, local communities, and relevant financial entities under the new LCIPP work plan that will be developed during this meeting. This is the synthesis I can tell you. I don't know if Rodion, you have some specific points you would like to highlight. Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Irina and the Secretariat for joining team working and for your commitment. Fundraising, it's always daily agenda for Indigenous peoples, particularly in terms of how to get access, direct access to fund, because there are still some challenges the Indigenous peoples are facing with, which means a lot of bureaucracy, not also very complex procedure, how to get direct engagement to fund. And of course, we encourage to continue this work until the next 2-year plans, because we all need more resources to provide adequate participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities at the UNFCCC process. And also, I believe we should broaden the fundraising issue, including not only UN bodies or governmental bodies, or also private donors that provide also resources to Indigenous peoples and local communities. So it's still an ongoing process, and there are a lot of work to do in front of us. But I believe that we already established some kind of basis, including online platform, how we can work in the future in terms of seeking more funds for increasing participation of Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodion, and thank you, Irina. Definitely take note of the good work that you've done and the need to broaden it, as you just said, Rodion, and consider it for the next work plan. So definitely would invite reflections from other FWG members on that proposal, as I think it's a good one. I also note that Graham in the chat has raised the idea of having Indigenous representatives join FWG members as co-leads. So something to reflect as well, and including as we draft the work plan in terms of potential partners, and happy to hear reflections on that comment as well. I see Andrea has her hand up already, so I'll turn to you, Andrea, and invite other FWG members to weigh in as well. I see Pesahang after Andrea.
Thank you, and thank you very much, co-leads, for your work on this important issue. My question is, because I don't have your report in front of me to maybe reiterate, not just for the members, but also for all of the participants and contributors. If just to ask what the specific recommendation was for broadening the funding from many of the sources that you named, including Green Climate Fund, IFAD, Jeff, et cetera, to include Indigenous peoples from all regions, which are right now discriminatory based on who colonized us, I guess, as one of our elders said. So if you could comment on that and just give us that assurance that that recommendation was included, that these funding opportunities like the UN Voluntary Fund is one that does be made available to Indigenous peoples from all regions. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I believe it is in the discussion paper, but I see Rodion and Irina would both like to respond. I think I saw Irina first, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And this is a very sensitive issue, actually, because of the foundation of the convention at itself, that is based in the principle of common and differentiated responsibilities, and how the funds were created, in particular when the fault of this climate crisis comes from the industrialized countries that created this problem. And the spirit of the convention was to recognize that the developing countries, we are still struggling for that development and make our life easier getting funding for in a sustainable and cleaner way. Then when you talk about the distribution of the funding, it is for developing countries. Indistinctively, if the developed countries have Indigenous people also, then the distribution of the resources, as suggested by Andrea, would be completely not based in the convention, as the principle of common responsibilities are stated there. It could be other ways, I think, for instance, mechanisms out of the system, not the GEF, not the GEF, not the other one. I'm sorry, I forgot. But other intergovernmental ways to get funding for Indigenous peoples, which are based in the developed countries. I hope I am clear about this. This is very important, very core for the developing countries' position, and we defend it very bravely in the negotiations. It's very difficult for us to change this. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. Rodion, did you want to also add?
Yes, thanks, Irina. And also, thanks, Andrea, for raising this issue, which is still a challenge. You remember, we are still discussing this issue on the different platform, and through the last meeting with Donna, we also have been raising this issue. So it's still a challenge and question how to make more balance global south, global north. But our position is that all 7 regions of Indigenous peoples living should have direct access to the foundation, to fund. But again, it's up to the different kind of donors and institutions, because some of them, for instance, have their own internal policy in terms of distribution. But again, it's still on our daily agenda And we have to continue this important discussion to avoid unfair in terms of all indigenous peoples having equal access to foundation. And once again, thanks for raising this question.
Thanks, Rorian. I see Andrea has put her hand back up. Did you want to quickly comment before we go to Pasang, Andrea, or is it about a different matter?
Yeah, no, it's directly responding to the answer. I think no one would claim that any indigenous peoples have responsibility for the current state of emissions and climate change. And I think maybe this brings up the point of really needing direct access to the Green Climate Fund and other funding opportunities for indigenous peoples themselves, rather than needing to go through state parties to access the funding. And that way we would not upset the apple cart and step on the toes of the developing countries that do need special support. If we could have direct access as indigenous peoples to these fundings, irrespective of the country that we live in, or who, as I mentioned before, who colonized us. One of our elders from Aotearoa, New Zealand said, okay, I understand now the funding is differentiated for indigenous peoples depending on who our colonizer was. So that's the status that we live in now. So if we could recommend direct funding for indigenous peoples, not through whatever state we happen to find ourselves living in now, that might solve this problem without disrupting the policies that are already in place. Thank you.
So sorry, but we are really running a bit behind the time, and then we know that the discussion on the funding is important, and we wanted to get a time for discussions at the end of this one. Maybe may I just suggest for the Facilitative Working Group members to dive deep in this one. Maybe we can have also another meeting. May I suggest that?
Thanks, Hindu. I think that's a constructive.
You are muted, Tom.
Thank you, Hindu. I think that's a constructive suggestion, and I think we can have a separate meeting offline to further discuss it and agree with your point. And I see Pasang has put her hand down, so I thank you for that flexibility, Pasang, and we'll make sure to discuss it offline with the co-leads. So turning back over to you, Hindu, who I think will co-chair us through the next 3 activities that we need to get through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and thank you, Pasang, for your flexibility, and all the Facilitative Working Group members. We can have the discussion on this. And I'm seeing a lot of input in the chat, and thank you so much for all your input and propositions. We will also accommodate some time to discuss about it at the end of the day, and then we will be very happy to take all your comment around the activities. So without losing time, let us move to the activity 7 in existing policies and practices for participation and outside the UNFCCC. That will be present with my dear friend Yo. Yo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Hindu. Greetings, everyone. Yes, so on behalf of my co-lead, my fellow co-lead Tom and myself, I will present on the progress for activity 7. The Secretariat will put up a PowerPoint slide shortly, but I will start off with a brief oral presentation. As you may be aware, as you are aware, part of the overall purpose of the platform is to enhance the engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the UNFCCC process. And so naturally the question arises, what are the existing policies and practices for the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under, as well as outside of the convention? in order to answer that question, Activity 7 maps the sort of landscape of participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in such bodies and processes. Activity 7 also attempts to identify gaps as well as possible opportunities to enhance this participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the international climate change policy process. To operationalize this particular activity and to ensure inclusiveness and invite views from parties, Indigenous peoples organizations, observers, as well as from other stakeholders in this topic. This particular activity, number 1, issued a call for submissions in March of last year. And number 2, invited the Center for International Environmental Law, or SEAL, to collaborate to support the implementation of this activity, including by providing some very valuable research assistance. Indeed, SEAL is specifically identified in the initial 2-year work plan of the platform under this activity as a potential partner for this activity. The results of this mapping effort are captured in a draft technical paper, as well as a complementary data set with an expansive detailing of the elements that made it into the draft technical paper. Both of those documents will be shared with the Facilitative Working Group through our online collaboration space on Microsoft Teams, as well as posted on the meeting page for the FWG to enable easy access for contributors to the platform. And I do think that at least the draft technical paper is already up on our online collaboration space. And eventually the complementary data set will be. Okay, so I see that the slide is up now. And so just to move to that, the mapping effort conducted under Activity 7 also revealed possible opportunities to enhance the respectful engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under and outside of the convention. And you see an attempt by us to represent those possible opportunities through this graph on the screen. These possible opportunities exist through, number 1, representational capacities for Indigenous peoples and local communities in various bodies and processes at the international, regional, and national levels. And they also exist through individual capacities for individual Indigenous peoples and local communities participating in their individual capacities in relevant bodies and processes, which you see on the other side of the graph. Importantly, connected to the attainment of these possible opportunities is the need to enhance funding as well as resource mobilization to support the engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under and outside the convention, which is of course something that the FWG has discussed regularly throughout this term, including through Activity 11, which we just finished discussing. So moving forward, this mapping effort under Activity 7 will benefit from future updates in order to be as current and relevant as possible, at least through the remainder of this current term, if not beyond. There are actually a number of climate change related bodies and processes outside the convention from whom we as co-leads are still trying to get, and the Secretariat are still trying to get feedback about the engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities in those bodies and processes. And we hope to receive such feedback in a timely manner. Once we do so, we will endeavor to update the technical paper, as well as the complementary data set. I think that is it for me at the moment. But like I said, Tom is my fellow co-lead on this activity. And if he has any additional comments or corrections, please feel free to chime in, Tom. if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Yo. I think you did a great job, and in the interest of being brief, I won't say anything further. Thanks again, Yo.
Thank you so much, Yo and Thomas, for all this great work you did in the activity 7. It is also very important as the funding, the participation of Indigenous peoples is really very relevant. And you just give a point of moving forward. We need to update this work in the current or upcoming work, because participation is ongoing and we need to do that under and outside. So if any members have any comments, quick comments or cautions to Yo and Tom, please. Okay, I think I paused it for a while, but I didn't see anyone. So that means you really did a great job and great summary of all the activity and reminding all the participants all the work that you presented. You can find it from the concept note to the work that they develop in the website. So you can also have a look on it for the discussions on this afternoon. Thank you. That makes us gain a little bit of time. So let me go to the next activities. That is activity 6. And activity 6 is also as important as all the rest. It is engagement and input across all the UNFCCC. So those are the recommendations that we are going to submit through some of the activities. And this work got 6 colleagues. And thank you to all the colleagues and to the Secretariat for this great work. And I think Irina is going to present the summary of this activity 6, right, Irina?
Thank you, Hindo, and thank you very much for the excellent introduction to our activity. So under the function of capacity building for engagement, the FWG was tasked to develop a set of recommendations on engagement and input of Indigenous peoples and local communities across the UNFCCC process for the consideration of the parties. Then the FWG was also tasked to develop guidance documents or a toolkit to accompany the draft set of the recommendations. The draft set of recommendations drew insights and lessons learned from the work plan activities and other work under the LCIPP. The draft set of the recommendations are structured in the following way. The first part serves like an introduction. It recalls relevant COP decisions and the articles of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of the Indigenous Peoples. Then the following section are reorganized to reflect to whom the recommendations may be particularly relevant. For instance, relevant bodies and processes under and outside the UNFCCC, recommendations for parties and recommendations for relevant entities, including financial entities. The updated draft set of recommendations was shared with the FWG members via our collaboration space. And moving forward, we see 2 possible approaches to finalize the implementation of this activity. One of them is to finalize the draft set of recommendations during this meeting and annex it to the FWG 5 report for the consideration of the parties later this year. We will then finalize the complementary guidance document intersessionally. Outputs from other activities can be also incorporated to the guidance documents, including the compilation of existing rights and safeguards protocols under the activity 1. And another option is allow more time for the members to review and provide additional inputs and finalize both the set of recommendations and the accompanying guidance documents by FWG, and disseminate the final inputs via the Lcip web portal. With either approaches, the Activity 6 recommendations and the subsequent considerations and implementations highlight the progress of FWG has made under the initial 2-year work plan. That's it. Thank you very much. Back to you, co-chairs.
Thank you very much, Irina, for the great summary of all these activities and recommendations. So I just open the floor if any members have any comments or suggestion of this work. And again, really thank you for this one. And I think we deserve to take this activity as more as possible, because our brother Estebancio, who passed away, used to be one of our co-lead of this activity. So I think also even for his memory and the memory of our ancestor, we must continue this activity 6. So yeah, Andrea.
Thank you, Hindu, and thank you, Irina. As one of the co-leads, I appreciate your summary. There's a couple of things, a question, first of all, if we leave more time for input, because maybe not all of the members have had a chance to actually review the current draft, what would the timeline be? And maybe the Secretariat can answer that. You know, when is the cutoff? Also, you did mention part of the activity deliverable as expressed in the current draft of activity 6 is to create a toolkit that will provide some guidance and a framework for the implementation of the recommendations. And one document that we've already completed for what is now part of activity 1 is the existing international standards document that provides the framework for some of the rights discussion. But there may be also other documents that have been generated in other activities, maybe the reports that we just heard about that could also be part of the toolkit. So I think we need to decide together what the timeline and time frame would be, both for any additional inputs in the draft on the recommendations, and also for contributions to the toolkit that will go along with these recommendations. So as one of the co-leads, maybe we decided that in our discussions, but maybe we need to get collaborative voices from all the members about those two aspects, the timeline for submission for the toolkit and the timeline for finalization of the activity 6 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. Yes. So all of us, the co-lead, we say that, and then I think that the members, you receive the email from the Secretariat that sharing you all the final work that we did. And in this final work, we propose to all of you, we need this toolkit or guidelines to do for the implementations. So we wanted to have your permission, or if you don't want it, to hear from you quickly, if anyone have a thought on it. Thank you so much. So I see like no one object in what Irina presented and what Andrea proposed, added to it. So I think Secretary is taking note of all this. So as colleagues, we can come back and see how we can add this toolkit or guidelines, and then we can have a timelines, and we can propose and agree all together, and we can also see how that can be considered into the upcoming work plan, because toolkit and guideline need a time, also need an implementations for all the countries, but also all the other partners that need to implement it. So thank you so much, Irina, for representing all of us. So colleague, we are moving to the activity 12, and after the activity 12, we will have the break, and then we come back with the rest of the activities and have our important discussions. I'm very excited with Tom also, because we are chatting to see your input into the chat and proposing languages, proposing all, and members are agreeing. So we will really love to have those discussions later. So may I call on the co-lead of the activity 12, promoting the LCIPP at the national and the regional level. So this is the next activities that we wanted to present. So this one will be presented by Andrea, right? Okay, who is the call? Or Yo? Okay, Yo. I'm seeing there is Yo, and I saw Andrea. So, Yo, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, co-chair. I'm sorry that you folks have to hear from me again this first part before we have a break. But yes, on this particular activity, activity 12, like you indicated, co-chair, Andrea and I are the co-leads for this particular activity, which aims to promote the platform at the national and regional levels. In that connection, two deliverables were mandated for this activity in the initial 2-year work plan for the platform. I'll go through each deliverable one by one. The first deliverable consists of a compilation of relevant good practices for developing national and regional platforms. The compilation, once it's put together, will enable the platform to map any particular initiative, whether it's another platform or another process or mechanism or another activity that, similar to the platform, specifically brings together parties, states parties, as well as local communities and indigenous peoples to work together and collaborate in response to climate change. The compilation will also enable the platform to collect information about how existing such initiatives work, paying special attention to the results and impacts that these existing initiatives at the national and regional levels have produced, paying attention as well to how indigenous peoples and local communities have participated in these existing initiatives, and paying attention to how the contributions from indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as climate change impacts that they have faced, have been considered by these existing initiatives. This compilation will also enable the platform to identify opportunities to assist in the enhancement and further development of such initiatives at the regional and national levels as appropriate, as well as promote future collaboration between the platform and these existing national and regional initiatives. At the present moment, Andrea and I, as co-leads of this activity 12, we recommend inviting national focal points for the convention, intergovernmental regional organizations, contributors to the platform, and the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change to take a survey in order to collect information on relevant practices for the compilation for this activity. We do note that the original draft for this concept note that was circulated does not include a reference to this particular survey. However, so in order for the survey to be launched, especially by the Secretariat, the Facilitative Working Group will need to approve a revision to the concept note to reflect the use of such a survey. And so Andrea and I propose that the Facilitative Working Group takes this decision on revising the the concept note on a no objection basis in order to reflect the inclusion of this survey as a tool. So that's the first deliverable. A second deliverable for this activity consists of a briefing note on the platform that would be disseminated to Indigenous peoples, local communities, parties, and other relevant stakeholders. The purpose of this briefing note is to inform Indigenous peoples, local communities, parties, and other relevant stakeholders about the platform, especially as in terms of how the platform relates to the development and implementation of national and regional platforms of a similar nature as the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform. A draft briefing note has been produced by the secretariat already, and it's with Andrea and I as co-leads for input before circulation to the membership. We do anticipate that materials for this activity will be shared online through relevant channels, including the web portal for the platform and other communication channels that Andrea and I will identify. I think that is it in terms of my presentation for activity 12. Please, Andrea, if you have any additional comments or corrections, if that's okay with the co-chair, please, Andrea, go ahead.
Yes, I believe that in addition to the survey, which we hope the caucus will assist us in disseminating and also in gathering responses. We had talked about approaching at least a couple of circumstances or, state and regional processes where we've taken note that platforms have been established along the same model, again, which is, equal input of state and Indigenous peoples, and if existing local communities in that process. And two that stood out that I had mentioned in our discussions were Costa Rica, which when we were there for the pre-COP 25, they discussed and demonstrated a platform that had been developed with, I think, all 7 Indigenous nations in Costa Rica, plus the state parties, to do exactly this along the model of the LCIPP, but on a national level. And another one on a regional level that I think exists, from what I understand, and Daley might clarify more about this, is the Arctic Council as a regional body. So we wanted to approach specifically, maybe for a case study, more detailed than the survey, of where we can identify that platforms have already been established along these lines. So we're open to any suggestions of state parties or Indigenous peoples or regional bodies that may be able to respond with more detail as a case study that could be included as a good practice. But the criteria is this equal participation, like we have at the LCIPP, between Indigenous peoples and state representatives focused on climate change solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yo, for the presentation of this activity, and Andrea for the additional recommendations. So we have like 2 minutes before the break, and so this is really ending good. Any comments from the members on this specific activity 12? This is elaborating, and we also hear from your propositions. I'm seeing Elvira, maybe we can come up to the discussions later, but
Yes,
if you are mandated, by I would say, I think Elvira, it's alternate to Irina, right? So, I mean, just to do not, as co-chairs, we have to give the same equity to all the participants. So maybe, Elvira, if you don't mind, we can keep you in the list to give you the floor during the discussion in the first, because members spoke, so all the alternate will speak, and then we can move to the discussions. So may I request if members have any comments from the presentation of Yo and Andrea, please? Okay, seems like all what you are presenting is really going being very clear, and I'm very happy about it, because I also personally understood that very clearly. So just from my side, if I can add that all survey my present the languages diverse languages that the Facilitative Working Group present, that will be one of the success of the survey, because we have this example in the activity 9. That's also why we got like a lot of responses in the survey than the submission. So that will be one thing. And when I hear Andrea talk about the study, and then of course she targeting the region that she knows, but maybe she do not know the other regions have already established before the Facilitative Working Group. Like in chat, we already have a platform between the government, indigenous peoples, and the scientists. And then in Kenya, it was the same. And then during this one, there was many other regionals gathering that reflect the Facilitative Working Group in Asia also. So maybe you can talk with for all the members or the representative of the 7 regions. So that can give you more ideas about the existing one to have a global study or global visions. So that can help you and you to lead it. And then if I can also suggest to you, maybe you can plan 30 minutes of discussion with the members around this concept note. It can be very helpful to see because we all talk about the national implementation, we all talk about the local implementation, and I think this activity can help us maybe to come up in and help all of you. So with that, I think we are on time. So thank you so much for all the first part. So we break 15 minutes. Hi, Pasang. Okay. You want to come in? So just to be quick, and then you can break. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I do not want to take away the break time. I just would like to thank you for your the proposals of the deliverables under activity 12. I think I totally agree, and this is a very important steps through the survey. The most important for us is like the implementation of all these different activities in the LCIPP at the global level, to make sure how we can have this kind of similar nature at the regional, and most important is local national level. So bearing on that mind, if we move ahead, I think we can achieve the goal of this activity. Thank you, Hindu, co-chair.
Thank you so much, Pasang. This is very relevant what you said, and hope that you'll consider it. So maybe just to move to the breaking, and then everyone can take a glass of water or coffee, and then please let us come back all on the 5:15 my time. So I don't know which time you are, but just like on the 15 we can come back, and my co-chair Thomas will take the first part of this discussion. So thank you so much, and see you in a while.
Chad, Coco, are we good to resume? I'm not hearing any objections, so I think we'll get started as we still have a lot to get through, and we do want to leave that space for discussion with contributors and beyond FWG members. So colleagues, I hope you enjoyed your break. Myself and Hindu as co-chairs discussed a few points that I'd just like to update the group on, but before we return to the activity updates. So one is in response to one of the suggestions in the chat, and I really do appreciate the enriching discussion in the chat, and we are taking notes. So thank you very much to all those who are contributing in the chat, because I do think it's an important input. But one of the suggestions concerned developing some guiding questions for tomorrow's breakout sessions on the development of the work plan. So as co-chairs, we discussed with the Secretariat, and we've asked them to come up with some guiding questions that will help inform our breakout sessions that we'll present to you tomorrow. And the second point that we wanted to respond to is the issues around translation and accessibility that were raised yesterday during the first day of FWG 5. We've proposed that we add it as an item under any other business so that we can have that discussion and reflect it in the report accurately, because I do know that it's an important issue for many of those around the table. So we'll look to have a discussion on that in the last day on any other business, and make sure that there's a recommendation or at least a reflection of the discussion in the report. So with those two announcements, I'd like to move to the next activity. We have 4 activities to get through before we open the floor to contributors. So I ask again for FWG members flexibility to please be brief in their comments as we discuss them. So the first activity that we'll be discussing is activity 3, which is information about Indigenous peoples' curricula and materials. It was co-led by Daly, Jane, and Basang. And I believe that Jane will be giving the update, if I'm correct, right, Jane? Perfect, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Aloha, everybody. So for activity 3, under the knowledge function of the LCIPP, this activity aims to identify and disseminate information about the development and use of Indigenous peoples' curricula and materials. Activity 3 considered materials, including those that incorporate Indigenous knowledge and languages in formal and informal education systems as they relate to addressing and responding to climate change. This activity stems from the understanding that place-based curricula, Indigenous knowledge, and cultural practices from around the globe are vital resources for climate change adaptation and mitigation. The work here aims to address the significant and concerning lack of Indigenous knowledge and values in education systems, both formal and informal. So the deliverables under this activity consist of identification of examples of curricula that can be replicated in other areas, and communication and dissemination of model curricula and materials via the web portal, the activities in this work plan as appropriate, and through other channels that we identify. To date, the co-leads for this activity have connected with ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment, under the UNFCCC to discuss collaborative opportunities for this activity. As co-leads, we are also in touch with university contacts that may assist with the compilation of materials. FWG members have been asked to assist in identifying materials and contacts on this topic from all the regions, and I'd like to remind our colleagues to send us your input and suggestions. It's with your help that we can compile the most relevant and useful materials under this activity. So just a quick email with a few bullet points even on what comes to mind regarding potential materials from your region would be very helpful. And I'd like to extend this not just to our FWG members, but the contributors listening in. An email has been circulated to the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and an upcoming email will come out to the LCIPP listserv inviting submission examples of curricula, materials, or contacts for those who may have them. The first 2 virtual seminars with Indigenous educators from across the 7 UN sociocultural regions are being prepared for the end of July or the beginning of August. So we'll have an upcoming seminar to kind of launch this activity and the collection. October 20th is the deadline by which the FWG will be asked to review and approve the compilation of materials, and we look forward to having a really rich and diverse set of materials to review. The scope of this activity encompasses a significant body of materials. The work plan activity represents an initial step. So the FWG could consider continuing compilation of curricula and related materials under the next work plan, since this is probably a better ongoing activity than a hard stop. For ongoing work on this activity in the next work plan, regional dialogues could be a really fruitful way to continue working on this, as well as collaborating with ACE and other partners, including the University Partnership Initiative that we've started. So if Pasang or Daly have any other comments to add, I invite them to do so. And yeah, thank you all for the time.
Not at this time. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
I'm fine, Jane, you have covered all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jane, and thank you for your work on this, and definitely take note of the suggestion to continue contributing to the compilation throughout the next work plan, including through linkages with the regional dialogues, as well as some work with ACE. So definitely important to reflect that suggestion in our discussions. The floor is now open to FWG members, and in case there are any comments or questions on the activity. I see Hindu has her hand up. Please go ahead, Hindu.
Thank you. Just so quickly, thank you so much for all of you. As I said last time, that the materials that exist is in French, the one in chat that established the first direction of the Indigenous school with the curricula and all. So all, I mean, the decree and all the work are in French. So if you can consider it and maybe translate it in one or another way, or Secretariat can help you. So I will be happy to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Hindu.
Any other reflections or comments? I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much, Jane. I think that speaks to the level of detail that you provided and the great updates. So thank you very much for your work on that, and thank you to all the colleagues for your work on this activity. So going to the next activity, which is that we will consider, which is activity 8, the multi-stakeholder workshops, which is being co-led by Pasang and Rodion. And I believe Pasang is going to be giving the update, if that's correct, Pasang? Yeah. Great.
Yes.
You have the floor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Good evening, and Tashidile Namaskar, and good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. My pleasure to share the update on Activity 8 Multi-Stakeholders in Session Workshop as co-lead along with Rodion, as already mentioned by Thomas. This LCIPP brings together diverse knowledge system, practices, and innovation of designing and implementing climate policy and action as the platform's third function. The multi-stakeholder workshop as inclusive way to bring together indigenous peoples and local communities and our diverse work experiences on the ground to inform the climate policies and action. This workshop is going to be like a more flagship events of the LCIPP. And the familiar features of the platform. So as we all are aware that LCIPP is kind of developed along with the different discourse on our issues and concerns that began with the multi-stakeholders workshop that started in 2017 in the process of the development of the LCIPP. So considering the value and the importance of this multi-stakeholders dialogue, we'll be continuing this tradition holding in Glasgow as part of the Activity 8 of the LCIPP initial 2 years work plan. This workshop aims to enhance the synergy and interaction with the climate change related bodies and process under and outside the convention. Multi-stakeholders workshop will highlight the existing policies and practices for the participation of indigenous people and local communities in the climate change related bodies process as mapped under the other activities as earlier presented also prior to the break session, especially activities 7, 9, 10, 11, especially mapping of the different policies and the, how the situation of indigenous people in the climate change national framework that has already covered in different activities earlier by our friends. as LCIPP initial 2 years work plan. And because this multi-stakeholders in-session workshop is very important for all of us, because we are inviting all the bodies outside, inside the conventions, and as well as all the state parties also who are pioneer in terms of engaging indigenous peoples in refer to the different mapping and all their earlier surveys. So we are also planning to coordinate with other activities also to make it more to enhance the synergy of our theme, especially in line with activity 1 when we are aiming for inviting our indigenous peoples, elders, and knowledge holders, and also the individual experts on the indigenous peoples issues and concerns, so that we can build a synergy between these 2 events in Glasgow. And all the information on these activities is already been posted on the FWG 5 meeting page. Kindly have a look. And we would like to welcome the FWG members' inputs and also welcome collaborators for different bodies under and outside the UNCCC in organizing these flagship events of the LCIPP. And moving forward, LCIPP may consider continuing this tradition of the LCIPP and whole multi-stakeholders workshop at the future session of the COP as well. And with this one, I would like to thank you and looking forward for your concrete and the valuable inputs and suggestions to make this event very successful and fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasang, and definitely happy to hear that it will be going forward at COP26 and continuing the tradition of the inclusive multi-stakeholder workshops that have been part of the platform for so long. Would any of the FWG members like to take the floor? Our CEO would like to take the floor, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, co-chair, and many thanks to the co-leads for this particular activity, for your excellent work and for updating us on the progress. And so I have, I guess, a couple of questions. Well, no, just one main question at the moment, or one main request at the moment. As the co-leads and the secretariat are putting together the sort of invitations for participants to the activity, to the event in COP26, I request that maybe you also work with the FWG membership as a whole, but especially, or at least with the co-leads of the relevant activities that you've highlighted, to see if we might be able to provide suggestions for bodies and processes and other entities that you might be able to invite to the activity. At least for Tom and myself on the activity 7, we did that extensive mapping effort with the assistance of SEAL and the Secretariat that canvassed a lot of bodies and processes under and especially outside the convention. And we might have some suggestions for those you might be able to reach out to, just to assist your work and to have a fantastic event at the end. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Yo, and fully echo those comments. It would be great to collaborate further on that. Would others like to take the floor to offer a question or comment? I see Rodion. Please go ahead, Rodion.
Yes, thanks, Thomas, and thanks, Pasang, for quite informative presentation. I also would like to highlight the importance of such kind of multi-stakeholders, because it would provide a new entry point in terms of synergy and how we also can bring all activities, outcomes to one table to share and to discuss and to exchange with all stakeholders and, of course, indigenous caucuses. So it's, of course, there are some work in front of us, particularly in terms of modality and more details, but let's hope that we will do it as offline, not online, but offline in later this year. Thanks.
Thanks, Rodion. I think that's a constructive suggestion. Would anyone else like to take the floor? I'm not seeing anything further, so thank you to both Rodiana. Oh, Pasang, would you like to before we
I
close?
just, yeah, thank you, Thomas. I just would like to, thank you for your excellent suggestion, because since multi-stakeholders trying to invite all bodies outside, inside, and the suggestion of inviting co-lead of the activities that has already I mentioned in my presentation, would definitely do that one, because that would enrich our knowledge and experience to enhance further for this fruitful workshop in Glasgow. Thank you very much, and we really welcome for the suggestion. As Rodian mentioned already, offline and through different channels. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Basang, and thanks to both you and Rodion for your hard work on this, and look forward to discussing further offline. So turning to the activities that are under the knowledge function of the platform, I'm pleased to turn to activity 1, which concerns annual meetings in conjunction with the COP, and it's co-led by Andrea, Basang, and Yo, and I believe Andrea will be giving the update on this, so please take the floor.
Thank you, Tomas, and thanks to my co-leads as well on this activity. This activity was intended to actually follow up on the outcomes of activity 2, which I'll talk about next, which has been postponed, the regional gatherings. But the idea was along the same lines, is bringing together our knowledge holders, which may be youth as well as elders, practitioners, food producers, different members of our communities on a regional basis, to talk about, most importantly, to share with each other the challenges they are facing, recommendations that they may have, good practices, good ideas, for protecting and safeguarding and implementing our traditional knowledge in a rights-based framework. And then secondly, producing recommendations for the states and the UNFCCC on how they can be supported in these endeavors on the local, on the ground, on the grassroots level, which is where these activities have to be protected and carried out. We had, because things were a little backwards because of the pandemic, we've requested that the UNFCCC support the participation of 4 knowledge holders selected by each of the regions, from each of the regions. And we've requested that the Indigenous members engage with their regions, the Indigenous peoples in their regions that make up their advisory group, or whoever's working with them on their representation in this body, to begin discussing those selections. We have not yet confirmed that the funding will be available, but our assumption is, since the UNFCCC didn't have to pay for any travel or hotel for us for the last 1.5 years, there must be some travel funds in the coffers. And even though we recognize that there are knowledge holders in the caucus, we really wanted to try to bring additional participants. And the idea was that this would be held face-to-face, even though there could be some accommodation for online participants, for instance, elders or practitioners not able to travel. But we wanted to have one full day, not so much speeches or presentations, but a roundtable on different key topics that are in the concept note, including intergenerational knowledge transmission and how that's taking place in our own Indigenous peoples and communities, which means we also want to bring youth to talk about what they need to be supported to keep these ways and practices going on the ground. So I hope that everybody reads the concept note that we've developed. We also have 3 specific deliverables that we all agreed to in the work plan. And one, luckily, we were already working on that last year, even in Yo and I's compilation with the support of CL on the existing rights of Indigenous peoples related to the exchange and safeguarding of our traditional knowledge. And that document, we consider it just about finished, but we do have an openness till the end of July for any additional comments if we left out any key instruments. We have divided them into those primarily addressing the rights of Indigenous peoples. We found 2 instruments addressing these issues, these exact issues relating to what could be called local communities in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Campesinos, or peasants as they like to call it, and also the Declaration on the Rights of Persons of African Descent did have some reference to these topics in a rights-based format. We also listed in an annex international standards that mention Indigenous peoples, mention traditional knowledge, mention sectors of Indigenous peoples like Indigenous women, but don't specifically put it in a rights format. So we've listed them for additional relevancy, but they weren't specifically on topic. The second compilation that we're charged to develop is one on the use of local knowledge systems. And since neither states nor Indigenous peoples agree to speak for local communities, we have developed a survey by which that knowledge may be submitted. And I want Nina to maybe take the floor as a member of the Secretariat to talk about how that survey is going. But before I turn the floor over, we've also begin to develop a document that we started working on last year, which is a compilation from Indigenous peoples ourselves, knowledge holders, practitioners, about what are our views on the safeguards and protocols that are necessary for protecting and safeguarding our traditional knowledge and practices. And the way we've started doing it is collective statements, declarations, outcome documents that were collectively adopted in Indigenous gatherings. And I know Pasang and I have had input, Jane has had input, and we're also requesting that the other Indigenous members from the other regions try to get some input by July 30th. Again, the same as the UN standards document. For this compilation. And as Daly mentioned, there was some very important points that emerged from the discussions on Article 4 that could be included. So let's see how we can develop this. And again, on this one, we're really trying to reflect the voices of Indigenous practitioners, knowledge holders, and our elders as well, of course. So that's my report on this. Oh, I should say that we plan to have a closed meeting of Indigenous peoples representatives with our knowledge holders. Probably we're looking at the second weekend, the weekend between the 2 weeks of the COP, maybe Sunday. And in which case the representatives can share freely with each other in a roundtable format, and then take some initial recommendations, not the full report, there won't be time, but have a half-day meeting, probably the Monday of the second week, in which we invite states and constituted bodies and other what you call stakeholders to hear the recommendations and the views that have been generated in the discussion of the closed meeting. So we do have a question of how we should include local communities in this dialogue, since that's what we're charged to do, but they're not an organized constituency at the UNFCCC. So we're kind of open to hearing what people think regarding that inclusion. But for Indigenous peoples, we want funding for 4 for each region, and I request my colleagues from the Indigenous regions to begin to discuss that process. We have also in North America. Thank you. That's my report. Maybe my co-leads want to add something?
You have covered all, Andrea. I think, yeah, we'll cover. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And maybe a quick question from my side. Are those deliverable documents that you mentioned on the collaboration space? Is that where members can review that?
The Secretariat, I want to again ask Nina, who is our Secretariat support for this, to talk a little bit more about the questionnaire survey for local communities, but she can also maybe add that as well.
Thanks.
No problem. Thank you so much, Andrea, and hello, everyone. So the documents for FWG review and inputs are all in the collaboration space, and those are 3 documents. So that's the draft concept note, compilation 1 and compilation 3, and those have all been uploaded to the FWG team's collaboration space. And then for compilation 2 on the use of local knowledge systems, the way we'll gather inputs from local communities on that is through a submissions portal launch on the UNFCCC submissions portal over the summer. So that way local communities will be invited to give inputs on experiences of the use of local knowledge in addressing climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. That's really helpful. So I believe the floor is now open to FWG members if they'd like to provide any questions or comments on the activity. I'm not seeing any. I'll just pause for another moment. Well, it would appear that, oh, go ahead, Andrea.
Just like for activity 8, this is intended to be an ongoing activity, so it will be incorporated into the work plan for each year coming up in the work plan. I think that's the main thing that I want to add.
Thanks, Andrea. And I think that's important, especially given that we haven't had the benefit to have it yet with the pandemic. So I think there's definitely some merit there. So I'm not seeing any further requests from the floor, and I think that's because you did such a good and comprehensive job of explaining the activity. So I would propose we move to the next activity, which I believe you'll also be presenting on, which is the regional gatherings.
If I could just briefly ask Coco, what is the status of our funding request for this? Because if we're asking our colleagues to reach out to knowledge holders and practitioners in their region, it's difficult to ask them to do that unless we actually know that we're going to be funded for the 4 representatives, at least to participate in that block of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when the COP welcomed the initial 2-year work plan, what happens in the climate negotiations is work plans and all activities will be endorsed or welcomed, and then there's also a financial implications, and we also have a budget negotiation. And so what happened with the work plan is the Secretariat made an estimate of all of the budgetary requirements or estimates. And because of the regional workshops being part of that endorsed package of activities, the Secretariat created a budget estimate for that, which went through the budget negotiations. That was all approved for the last biannual budget. And so although certain activities, well, one of the activities didn't take place because of the pandemic. All of the other activities took place in one or the other format, thanks to all of your heroic efforts. But what I'm trying to say is that this activity has been budgeted. I have made the internal request for that. And now with the co-leads, it's a matter of planning and doing all of the day-to-day things like doing invitations and things like that. So Andrea, for you and all of the co-leads and for the FWG, unless FWG has further comments or refinements that you'd like to see, as long as FWG agrees, then the Secretariat will continue supporting the co-leads to implement that activity. And just specifically, what Andrea has said is the plan would now be to reach out to the 7 sociocultural regions and have an aim to invite 4 knowledge holders. So unless anyone has anything against that, we could proceed on that basis. Thank you.
I see Hindu would like the floor. Hindu, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. So just is that each region will organize his own meeting, or just it will be in one region and then the knowledge holder will be invited? So because I'm always worrying about equity and justice, having the participant from the regions to be all there. So may you clarify in this one if you budgeted each region, or you just like did one region and then the other may be invited, and then maybe we can discuss on this.
I can respond. Maybe I wasn't clear. This activity will take place at the COP, and each of the members of the 7 Indigenous social cultural regions will work with their region, the Indigenous peoples in their region, to designate 4 knowledge holders who will be funded to participate in the activity. One roundtable among Indigenous peoples on the first day, and then the second day will be a half-day dialogue with states and constituted bodies to share some of the outcomes. So that's, yeah, there'll be 4 for each region, and you just need to designate, work with your region to designate who those will be from Africa, in addition to those separate from those that ordinarily participate in the caucus and in the COP. So these are new representatives.
Thanks, Andrea, for that. Yeah, I just missed the point that you said it is in the COP. I remember also during our discussion, I made that clear that in African region, we do not have, like, it will be very difficult for us to nominate 4 peoples and left behind 1 sub-region, because in Africa, we do have 5 sub-regions. And as the numbers of Indigenous peoples are so higher in all the 54 countries of Africa, so we are not having like this social cultural, we can have at least, because if we go through the social cultural of African Indigenous peoples, we have 6 regions. But if we go to the normal regions, we have 5 regions. And I made that last time, if we have 4 peoples, it will be for us a very difficult that to left 1 region behind. So I don't know if maybe the members can think or discuss about that, but that will be fear for me, because otherwise it will be more difficult. Thank you.
Yes, we have 1,200 recognized tribal nation governments, even just in 2 countries of North America, and many, many language groups and ecosystems and food systems. But we also can do independent fundraising, and we're working on that like we did last time to see if we can bring additional representatives into this process. So I think we should start to think about that as well. If we need to do independent fundraising, we need to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I think that's a good response. I see Daly has her hand up. Please go ahead, Daly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to signal my support for this initiative, and for clarity, we're talking about 28 Indigenous knowledge holders to be funded by the UNFCCC Secretariat. So I just wanted to signal my support for this, and also echo what Andrea has said, that if there are other Indigenous knowledge holders and youth and other Indigenous people's representatives that can be attracted to the meeting, encourage regions to identify other resources to do so. Thank you.
So sorry, but just to come back, I think I misunderstood maybe both of you. I understood what Andrea said, that as co-facilitators and as also members, we will look for the additional funding. I do not see that like, then I understood from Dali, you say like each region can look. And if each region look, and then we will be again left behind. That's the part I wanted to avoid. And as also we are talking about climate change, remember what Irene said, responsibility of polluted pay and whatever, we don't want it to come through all this. So I want to ask if we have to globally as 7 regions together, but if some are going back to one regions or another region, so then it will be again leaving some peoples behind that we wanted to avoid. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Hindu. Andrea, would you like to respond?
Yes, just like last time, we were able to receive some funding through a foundation that one of our IITC staff had made, and we made that funding available for COP25. And as it was only the American continent regions, Latin America, North America, responded, and we were able to get additional members there just to participate in the COP. So we're going to make that effort, and I do hear you, Hindu, that if we're able to identify additional funding, we will maybe say, okay, we got one more for each of the regions, for this, or something like that, so that there is an equity. And I appreciate what you're saying. It's going to be very difficult for each of the regions. Latin America, that has 32 different countries and 4 different languages, it's going to be also challenged with selecting 4, but at least we're getting 4, which is, that's something, that's a start. Maybe next year it will be 8. We'll have to see. But if IITC can identify additional funding for this, we will make sure it spreads, throughout all the regions. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. And I think that's an important point to register, and some constructive suggestions going forward. I see Pasang, and then I would ask that we move to the next activity. But Pasang, please go ahead.
Thank you, co-chair. And I totally agree with Hindu's proposals. It's how we can have more inclusive representatives from addressing all our reasons, right? If we see the data. If you see the data, like 6.2% of the indigenous people population around the world, almost more than 72% are in Asia. No, so if you see like that one, I mean, I think if you see in terms of number, I think there should be more diverse, and then also similar cases in Africa and Latin America. So having said that, I do not mean that other socio-cultural representative numbers would be less, and I definitely encourage, because we have distinct our issues and concerns to be reflected. However, I think maybe considering considering the situation of the diverse groups in Asia, Africa, and even Latin America, I think we seek Secretariat help, because this LCIPP is also working in bilateral and multilateral agencies. So why not taking this opportunity to at least write one kind of email exploring that whether if they are really focusing on their priority for building the capacity and engaging indigenous people. In the funding resources earlier, we saw there are so many agencies. I was noting down in my diary, like JEF and the IFAD, GCF, and so many one. So we all are working, but the reality is different. So if they really want to empower indigenous people, I would really encourage Secretary to approach them to have indigenous full engagements, to have more and more voice, considering the diversity within the region. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pasang, and some good points there, I think, in terms of engaging both activity 11, and I think Hindu's suggestion in the chat about herself and I helping out however we can as co-chairs to also support the fundraising activity so we can have as diverse and broad and equitable representation of Indigenous knowledge holders at this activity. You have our full support there as well, co-leads. So with that, I'd like to close discussion on this activity. We have one more activity to discuss before we can get to the dialogue with all those who want to contribute to our discussions. That activity is activity 2, regional gatherings. It's been co-led by Andrea, Irina, Medard, and Estebancio, who I understand gave a really outstanding contribution to this activity, and is unfortunately, as you all know, no longer with us. And I think making sure that we realize the potential of this activity, as Hindu was saying, is key for our work. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Andrea, who I believe will also be updating on this activity to give us a sense of where things are at. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't have too much to say. I did reflect on what was anticipated to be the importance of the regional meetings that would be funded also by the UNFCCC to bring our knowledge holders, practitioners, and members together to talk with each other on a regional basis. As I shared before, Estebancio and I were planning a joint, a 2 regional meeting together from North America and Latin America, Caribbean in Cunayala in Panama for our meeting and doing independent fundraising as well as counting on the support of the Secretariat and the UNFCCC for funding these activities. Obviously, with the pandemic, as has been said before, and Estebancio and I were both very firm on this, these kinds of gatherings can't happen virtually. They need to be that direct discussion and sharing among our own peoples. Personally, a lot of our elders will not even talk about these things on a computer. They think we're crazy when we ask them to do that, you young people, what are you talking about? So we still plan to roll over that activity. The concept note was completed some while ago, and it's still posted and still stands. And I think it's just a matter of making sure that in the 3-year work plan coming up, that we really try to carry out a lot of these regional gatherings the first year, or maybe the first 1.5 years, because this is the basis to inform so many of our other activities, including these global gatherings, including all aspects of our work plan. What do our people say about these things? What are their views and needs and instructions and challenges and intentions to engage? And what are the criteria that they would require to engage? So that's all I want to say about it, that it has been rolled over, but I would really like to see if we could carry out most of these regional gatherings in the first 1.5 years of the new work plan. And maybe can talk about continuing regional gatherings throughout, but I think we need that input. And if people are willing, we can include this also as a regular activity. The challenge is there's 7 regions, and all of them are very big and spread out and will require flights and other such things. So we need to talk about really how the resources for these activities will be carried out going forward in the new work plan. But they are essential, and they are the basis for so much else that we've been talking about. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Pasang, I see you requested the floor. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Maybe I'll just lower down my hand so that it doesn't look okay. Yeah, thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Andrea, for giving the summary of regional gathering activity 2. I think you are completely right that the face-to-face discussion, dialogue, or verbal communication is a prime for Indigenous peoples, especially if you really want to learn lessons from each others. And virtual reality has always been challenging, even for us. With the internet connection, you never know where it ends and and then we will not meet the intention of this purpose. And I really would like to encourage that continuation of this regional gathering. I think we'll be discussing tomorrow and day after tomorrow, because as the implementation of the platform in the regional and the national level, and this will really boost for activity 12 for the implementation in the regional level, because then we understand we have a common kind of issues and concerns, but we have also distinct characteristics, the nature of indigenous people in each region, and that is how we can build up the issues from the each region. And I would be more than happy to propose the coming up regional in Asia and Africa.
Thanks, Basong, and certainly note the I think the interest among most FWG members in having this continue in the next work plan, and look forward to discussing it tomorrow and Thursday. Any other further requests for the floor?
I have one more information note. People will notice, even though this concept note was posted, mid-year last year, the introduction page for this concept note and all the concept notes, the former description, the trusted and inclusive workspace, has been removed from this concept note and from all the concept notes. And I propose that we utilize the accepted language to describe the LCIPP that I circulated for the work plans and for the participation. And I think we decided we might have a separate discussion on the description. But in the meanwhile, I'm requesting that we agree, and nobody disagreed when I sent it around and asked that the brief description of the LCIPP that is taken from the work plan, that we utilize that until we have further discussion, if we even need to, about how to describe the work plan. And I think everybody got that document. We might want to add that at the end when we talk about other issues, how we're going to deal with that. But it has been changed on this one and on all of the concept notes. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I think happy to add that to the any other business section, and speaking from my side, I think using agreed language is a constructive way forward, and happy to go with that. But I see Hindu has her hand up, so please go ahead, Hindu.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I mean, actually, I'm going to propose exactly what you did. That's why I'm smiling, yes, to having it in any other matter, because we talked a lot about the languages and it's important. So then I take also the opportunity to confirm what Pasang said for the regional gathering, that Africa and Asia are thinking about how we can have the regional gathering. So if the Secretariat can take a call on it, and then of course, as colleague, yourself, Andrea, we can discuss on it, how we will be organize it later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hindu. A last call for any requests from the floor. And I'm not seeing any, so I'm quite thankful to all my FWG colleagues for helping us keep time. I'm pleased to say that we have, I believe, about 40 minutes for a dialogue with contributors and those participating, and I will hand it over to my co-chair Hindu to lead that discussion. Over to you, Hindu.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Firstly, thank you for facilitating these activities and ending them. And I would like to thank all the colleagues for all the activities that you really summarize it well, and the Secretariat for all your technical support for the summary and presentation of those activities. And I remind all of you again, if you wanted to have more information, they are all in the website. So before closing this agenda item on the review and assessment of the initial work plan, So we would like to open the floor to the dialogue with the contributors or all the participants who are there. And I'm seeing a lot of comments in it, in Spanish, in English. And so you can all get the chance to speak. So just to remind you, maybe if you all forget a little bit about the titles of the activities. So activity 10 is about the good practices for Indigenous peoples and local communities participation in the national climate policies. Activity 9, it's on the consideration or engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the UNFCCC policies, action and communication. Activity 11, on existing funding within the UN system and additional funding opportunities for participation. Activity 7, on existing policies and practices for participation under and outside the UNFCCC. Activity 6, on engagement and input across the UNFCCC process. Those are the recommendations. Activity 12, on promoting the LCIPP at the national and regional level. Activity 3, information about Indigenous peoples, curricula and materials. Activity 1, on annual meeting in conjunction with the COP. Activity 8, on the multi-stakeholder workshop, and activity 2 on the regional gathering. So those are all the activities we discussed before the break and now. So please, if you wanted to take the floor, you can write your name down or you can raise your hand. So then from the Secretariat, they will support me to give you the floor. So before that, I open it to all of you. I would like firstly to give the floor to Elvira, who is the, mon anglais se mélange maintenant avec mon français, qui est l'adjointe à Irina. Qui est adjointe à Irina. Donc, Elvira, je te passe la parole avant les autres. Vas-y. Elvira, okay. Do you have interpretation? Because I don't have.
Sí, gracias. Bueno, primero que nada, muchas gracias por y saludar y felicitar el avance y la información que nos han anticipado los hermanos de del grupo facilitativo. Yo quería incidir un poco sobre algunos temas que me parece jalando la reflexión de ayer a hoy día. Una de las mayores preocupaciones del día de ayer ha sido cómo todas estas actividades las podemos operacionalizar en el ámbito local, regional, nacional, porque una reflexión que hacían era que los impactos y la afectación del cambio climático es una cosa completamente real en los pueblos indígenas, pero además los saberes de los pueblos indígenas pueden aportar enormemente en la gestión del cambio climático. Entonces, con mira a los desafíos de lo que va a ser el nuevo plan de trabajo, yo creo que en general las 12 actividades que nos hemos planteado, que estaban planteadas en principio muchas de ellas como una indagación, un mapeo, hoy nos permiten plantear actividades para el futuro más concretas, más operacionales en el terreno mismo. Y creo que una tarea es cómo ahora podemos darle practicidad después de haber trabajado en ese mapeo. Yo me limito, por ejemplo, a una actividad que nos ha tocado impulsar en el primer año de la plataforma, que es la actividad 11 sobre el mapeo del financiamiento, y la actividad 12 que es sobre la promoción de la plataforma en los ámbitos regional y local. En el caso de la actividad del mapeo de financiamiento, creo que es muy importante ahora avanzar en instrumentos concretos que faciliten incorporar la participación de los pueblos indígenas en la acción climática, es decir, en todas esas fuentes de financiamiento, incidir para que se abran líneas específicas, pero además ya proponerlas en la plataforma. Y en el caso de la actividad, en la actividad 12, que es la promoción de las actividades regionales, y locales, ahí yo quisiera que este trabajo, este informe sobre buenas prácticas que se va a realizar, realmente haga un esfuerzo muy grande de poder revelar todas las acciones que se han hecho a nivel de las regiones, desde los pueblos indígenas y desde los esfuerzos de los estados para articular la participación de los pueblos indígenas en la toma de decisiones del cambio climático. Desde luego que desde las partes esta inclusión de los pueblos indígenas es muy diversa, en unas intensa, en otras no. En el caso, por ejemplo, de la región de América, creo que han habido esfuerzos notables, y se los mencionaba ayer, esfuerzos notables respecto a que no se limitan solamente al ejemplo que nos daba Andrea Carmen sobre el ejemplo de Costa Rica. Creo que hay esfuerzos enormes en relación, lo mencionaba Perú, con la incorporación en su ley de cambio climático de la conformación de la plataforma de pueblos indígenas. En el caso de Bolivia, creo que una de las tareas, incluso el espacio que tuvimos la oportunidad de compartir, este diálogo informal que se realizó en Bolivia, en Cochabamba, para justamente impulsar y generar y aportar un poco en la decisión de la construcción de la plataforma. Ha sido también un esfuerzo impulsado por las organizaciones indígenas, originarias, campesinas, articuladas en una plataforma nacional que se ha construido a la luz del diálogo y de los esfuerzos que se han dado en el marco global de Naciones Unidas. Están los esfuerzos de Guatemala y de muchos otros países, entonces me imagino en otras regiones también, pero yo pediría que este esfuerzo recoja los diferentes niveles de participación en lo institucional, desde las propias, desde los pueblos indígenas, desde la articulación de la sociedad, Estado, porque ahí con seguridad vamos a encontrar muy buenas prácticas, pero además en una tarea central, y aquí yo quiero hacer énfasis en que la actividad 12 es de pronto la actividad que está respaldada por una decisión de la COP en la que dice y se alienta a las partes, y creo que es parte central del plan de trabajo, y además es el instrumento que nos va a ayudar a operar, porque de pronto yo estoy pensando en alto, un evento regional es muy lindo porque reúne a 4, a 5, a 10, a 20 tomadores de decisión, pero que eso lo alentemos en el nivel nacional, que alentemos a las partes, porque es también nuestro trabajo como plataforma, alentar. Ayer los hermanos decían, el esfuerzo está muy puesto en la parte de capacitación a los indígenas, pero bueno, ¿qué hay sobre la sensibilización a las partes para que realmente se abran a ese espacio de inclusión concreto? Entonces, trabajar un encuentro regional, pero trabajar y promover que estas plataformas y estos espacios promuevan encuentros nacionales, regionales, es donde vamos a poder amplificar, diseminar todo el trabajo que estamos haciendo en la plataforma. Entonces, me parece muy importante que aterricemos en ahora plantear bueno, primero enriquecer este informe y que tome realmente esa diversidad de acciones, y luego plantearnos en la actividad 12 con miras al trabajo de mañana y pasado, acciones concretas que pueden impulsar, este es el pretexto para impulsar a las partes, además respaldadas por un mandato, para que abran esos espacios y esos diálogos en sus espacios nacionales y regionales. Bueno, eso en principio, muchísimas gracias por cederme la palabra.
Thank you very much, Elvira. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for all the points that you highlight. They are really very important, and we would love to have them also in writing. I mean, Irina is there, of course, we know, but it will be good to have any input in case, and then we can look at how we can accommodate your recommendations. So colleagues, be short, and then we can have as much possible that people can speak. So I have in the list here Lola Gapnal and then Damayanti, who are asking for floor. And to remind you also, our two co-chairs of the caucus are here, Grams and Juan, in case that you wanted to speak. So just also let us know. So Lola. por favor.
Sí, hola, buenos días, hermanas. Hola, ¿me escuchan?
Hola.
Muy buenos días. Primero saludar a todas y todos sus hermanos, que realmente me da mucho gusto poderles ver y estar en este espacio importante. Agradezco toda la información que nos han aportado quienes están trabajando mucho en este grupo, y pues creo que es muy importante para todas nuestras regiones la información y saber de que estamos en los procesos de paso a la COP 26, ¿verdad? Entonces, yo concuerdo con la hermana que me antecedió. Creo que es tan importante recalcar cómo las regiones podemos estar seguros de poder hacer nuestras reuniones, y no solamente en las regiones, sino también a nivel nacional de cada uno de nuestros países, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo, en Guatemala, aquí, bueno, yo soy de Guatemala. En Guatemala, pues ahorita se están actualizando los NDCs, las políticas de género y otras cosas que se están actualizando, pero realmente medibles, acciones medibles que garantice la incorporación de las acciones prácticas dentro de las comunidades locales y fortalecimiento de capacidades a los actores, locales. Está siendo complicado porque tenemos un gobierno que realmente no reconoce a los pueblos indígenas, y no hay espacio para hacer mucha incidencia en este proceso. Entonces consideramos de que es muy importante ver cómo nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, también podamos incidir. Nosotros estamos tratando la manera de poder ampliar nuestro trabajo. Trabajamos para estar en estas reuniones a nivel nacional, pero creo que ha sido un poquito difícil porque no se ha hecho mayores cosas en cuanto al trabajo con los pueblos indígenas a nivel nacional. La otra cuestión que quiero entender es que las reuniones regionales, según entendí que dijo la hermana hindú, es que se van a hacer a inicio de la COP, ¿verdad? No sé si estoy así, si estoy entendiendo bien, que se pueden hacer, se van a hacer las reuniones, por ejemplo, en donde se van a delegar por región cuatro participantes para que puedan estar presentes en estos eventos. Y creo que es muy importante. Yo creo que el hermano Juan Carlos, que está dentro de este proceso, pues estará, no sé cómo estará coordinando a nivel regional de Latinoamérica, pues en vida de nuestro hermano Estebancio, pues creemos de que América Latina sigue de pie y seguimos trabajando, y como espacio que dejó nuestro hermano Estebancio, pues vamos a continuar con los procesos, y yo creo que es muy importante ponernos al tanto, y recalco que estoy completamente de acuerdo, tomar en cuenta los conocimientos de la juventud. Quizás hay mucho que hacer en este espacio. El tema de la educación. La educación es tan importante para poder promover el desarrollo de las comunidades, sobre todo las comunidades indígenas y de las mujeres. Así que muchísimas gracias, hermanos y hermanas.
Thank you very much, Lola. It's so great to have you here. Colleagues from the Facilitative Working Group and Secretariat, there are also some questions from Elvira and from Lola. So at the end, if the time allocate, I will request to each of you who wanted to give a clarification. So for now, I give the floor to Damayanti. Damayanti, please go ahead. And then after you, Juan.
Thank you very much. Am I audible, please? All right.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, my name is Damayanti Prabhasari. I'm from Indonesia and currently representing Yongo as an observer in this event. So first of all, congratulations for the elected co-chair and the vice co-chair for FWG. Just to raise up my concern on the youth participation, especially indigenous and local youth, in drafting the second um, work plans on the FWGs and the LCIPP. Of course, while we try to say about the inclusiveness and the participations, we need to hear directly from youth and maybe from the constituency, and of course any other organizations or the individuals uh, regarding to these issues, and also at the implementation level in the regional session, there are still lack of um, the participations of indigenous youth, especially regarding the voice on the table. So I think we need a special request, especially for specific consultation made by the FWGs and the LCIPP for the youth. So we could engage youth participations uh, regarding the indigenous and local communities, and also give them a floor and give them exactly opportunity what they need. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damayanti. It is very important, the voice of youth, and then in the decisions of facilitative working group members, I think we have one of the criteria is youth, another criteria it's gender. And I think so, that's what we have in our negotiation, and we wanted to give this accommodation in all the activities implementation. Hopefully that all your notes are considered and we can discuss as facilitative working group members too. So let me give the floor to Juan, and then after that I see Maria and Cristal who are asking for the floor. So go ahead, Juan.
Sí, hola. Gracias, Hindú. Gracias, Toma, por su liderazgo y desearles éxito por ser electos ahora en este proceso. Yo solamente quería saludar y plantear dos cosas de fondo y muy general. Estamos de acuerdo acompañando desde el Caucus Global. Estamos también participando y atendiendo las deliberaciones y también hay hermanos y hermanas que por primera vez están participando y hemos hecho el esfuerzo de conectarlos, y se ruega, también les hemos dicho y estamos alegres por las traducciones. Punto 1. Punto 2, también quisiera conectar y reforzar dos cuestiones. El tema sobre la conectividad en marco de los derechos de nuestros pueblos indígenas. Estamos conscientes de ese largo proceso, esa larga información que existe. En ese marco, quisiéramos también recordar que en ciertas regiones, países, existe, como en el caso de Ecuador, los derechos de la naturaleza. Si bien es cierto, es importante recapitular experiencias positivas que existen en ciertos países y que está reconocido por el marco constitucional. Y esto es importante, que me lleva un poco a reforzar el tema de la actividad 12, en el tema de que hay experiencias, mesas de trabajo a nivel nacional, reconocidos en algunos casos constitucionalmente por bajo decreto ejecutivo, y eso hay que tomarle atención porque, si bien es cierto, en ciertas regiones hay hermanos y hermanas que todavía no tienen acceso a la tecnología, que todavía tienen, que quieren decir mucho a través de sus líderes y sus liderazgos. Más bien animarles, puntualizando que es muy importante llevar la vocería de todos y el gran trabajo y la responsabilidad que tienen todos ustedes. Nosotros siempre desde el Caucus, del Foro Internacional Indígena de Cambio Climático, estamos acompañando, estamos revisando y recibiendo todas las informaciones y comentarios de los hermanos, en este caso de Abya Yala y de las regiones, 7 regiones socioculturales, como nos reconocen. Éxitos ahí y un abrazo grande y estamos en contacto. Abrazos.
Gracias, brother Juan. It's very good to have you, and thank you also for representing us and talking on behalf of the caucus too. I'm seeing another hand from Lola. Is it the older hand? To do not just confuse the ordering the floor. So may I give the floor to Maria Egenia? You have the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias. Nairakata Maasuma Aruntawi Takechuimampi, Gilatanaka, Culiacanaka. Les saludo en mi idioma aymara. Muchas gracias por esta oportunidad. Felicitar también a quienes están llevando adelante estas acciones. Quiero decir que sus palabras, su accionar nos consolidan como pueblos indígenas, nos fortalecen como pueblos indígenas, nos devuelven la dignidad como pueblos indígenas. En cuanto a las actividades, quiero mencionar que la inclusión de la participación de pueblos indígenas, sobre todo de las mujeres indígenas, los jóvenes indígenas, portadores de sujetos, de los conocimientos tradicionales, debe ser transversal en todas las actividades que se piensa realizar o que ya se están realizando a través de la plataforma. También quiero decir que obviamente en cada de las actividades se debe considerar también cuestiones específicas relacionadas a cada actividad. Por ejemplo, en cuanto a la comunicación y su incidencia, requiere que estas formas de comunicación no solamente sea en los idiomas oficiales, sino también el esfuerzo desde las organizaciones a la cual somos parte y de verdad que estamos trabajando, ¿no? Como por ejemplo en la red de mujeres indígenas sobre biodiversidad. Estamos también con las distintas organizaciones del Foro de Abya Yala que hacen parte de todo este esfuerzo, pero es importante considerar de que la información debe ir al menos en idiomas locales. Obviamente no vamos a llegar a todos, pero quizás tomando en cuenta la mayoría de idiomas locales que se hablan en nuestros países y en nuestras regiones. Un primer punto. Posteriormente, la cuestión de los fondos adicionales para la participación. Esto es importante. Los estados, las instituciones, obviamente necesitan capacitar, necesitan conocer a los pueblos indígenas, pero también debe ser vamos a decir a la inversa, los pueblos indígenas, las mujeres indígenas, como portadores de los conocimientos indígenas, pues deben capacitar a quienes, diremos, no conocen estos procesos internos de cómo son los conocimientos tradicionales, que no únicamente es una cuestión técnica, sino es que va de aquello que viene a ser lo espiritual. Es que los conocimientos tradicionales son holísticos. Está relacionado con el idioma, la cultura, la territorialidad. Está relacionado con aquello que es la cosmología, la visión, el pensamiento y el enfoque indígena. Entonces, pues aquí termino, sería muy largo hablar. Muchas gracias. Hayaya.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you for all your sharing and then the recommendation that you give as of course, we have to include the Indigenous women, Indigenous youth in all the local activities. And yeah, thank you also for being here. We are there to serve the Indigenous peoples, as you said, so we will do our best to have the language and the inclusion of all. So I have next in my list, Crystal Martinez. So please, if anyone wanted to take the floor, it is open to all, from the UN agencies or organizations who are there, the country representative, and everyone, Indigenous peoples, all. So it's open to all of you for the discussions. And while also there was a lot of discussion in the chat. So Crystal, please go ahead.
Hi there. Do you mean Crystal Martin or Crystal Martinez? I just wanted to confirm that it's me that you're referring to.
Sorry for that.
Okay, no worries. I just don't want to be speaking if it's not me. Thank you so much. Crystal Martin Lipinski Yunga Damani Canada me Nunakaktugu Dakwa Inuit. I am Crystal Martin Lipinski. I am Inuk here in Canada, and also part of the Inuit Circumpolar Council as well. And I've actually supported ICC as a youth representative at COP25 and have been supporting ICC from that perspective over the last 2 years. For that, I'm very thankful for it. I wanted to circle back to Indigenous youth. I've heard throughout this meeting today that there is a big focus on this, that the FWG is open to ensuring they're inclusive and having youth perspectives, but I think it needs to be just more than that. Indigenous youth come with various perspectives from their communities and from their states. And so we're all very distinctive. And I think it's really important to emphasize the distinction of Indigenous peoples and experiences and perspectives, particularly if you look at Indigenous youth of the Arctic. Our realities in terms of climate and impacts of biodiversity, all of that is very different from those Indigenous youth that are coming from, say, Africa or Latin America. And so I think it is really important that when there's these engagements, that these engagements is meaningful and fully inclusive of Indigenous youth, and not just allowing a seat at the table for one youth per se. You really need to look at the distinctive approaches of Indigenous youth. And having an Arctic Indigenous youth is extremely important. And it's not to say the engagements haven't been meaningful, they have, but it needs to be bulked up. We need to look at how we can ensure that they're properly represented. And I think it's really important, from what I have heard from Indigenous youth across the globe now, and particularly within the Arctic region, is that youth need to be being part of the decision-making process. And it's not about just these engagements. So that's what I mean by meaningful, is that Indigenous youth must be part of those decision-making, and that it really is, it really should be distinctive based as well. And that will really ensure that it's fully inclusive. And in terms of participating as well, it's not about local community initiatives either. This is on an international level. These are systems that Indigenous youth are wanting to participate in. Locally based initiatives are something that we are already part of, something that we're already driving in our communities. But we want to also be part of that larger impact at the United Nations and ensuring that our voices are collective, and that we're able to make necessary changes for future years to come as well. So with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Christelle. It's really very important. Indigenous youth need to be in the tables and take the decisions. Totally agree with you, and we should have them from all our regions. So I think since yesterday, we are hearing the voice of the youth, and this is also how we are seeing the youth rising from all the different places, and we need to include them. Thank you so much for this input. Anyone else from the participant or contributors who wanted to take the floor?
Sí.
Okay. Someone else? I'm just hearing the voice. I do not see the hand. Who wanted to take the floor?
Levanté la mano.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, Elvira, I will come back to you. I'm asking for the other contributors, and then I saw your hand. I will come back to you, of course. I think I paused for some seconds, so no one from any other contributors who wanted to take the floors. So I go back to Elvira first, and then to members, if anyone of you also wanted to have a quick response or comments to the dialogue that we have, and then we will close the journey. So dear sister Elvira, you now.
Gracias, Hindu. Solamente recordar que en la elaboración del primer plan de trabajo, un tema que ha sido prioritario ha sido recoger las 3 funciones de la plataforma y sobre esas 3 funciones articular las actividades. Creo que esa va a ser la misma línea para el siguiente plan de trabajo, pero me gustaría tocar un punto porque he visto en el chat 3 prioridades que se habían discutido el día de ayer y me gustaría incorporar en esas prioridades 2 temas. En el caso del primer punto que dice reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, me parece que ese es un esfuerzo planetario de todos y sin embargo creo que hay que resaltar que para los pueblos indígenas, además de del compromiso en la reducción y del aporte en este esfuerzo global, están también el generar, y debería ser una prioridad del plan de trabajo, mantener este equilibrio entre adaptación y mitigación. Eso es central, porque los pueblos indígenas de pronto son los que en este momento están sufriendo con mayor rigor los impactos del cambio climático, pero además asociados incluso a daños y pérdidas que están afectando territorios indígenas en gran medida. Les quiero recordar el episodio del huracán del año pasado que ha vivido Nicaragua y otros países, y creo que es importante en ese punto que incorporemos este balance, ¿no? Que se mantenga también como una prioridad del plan de trabajo, generar los mecanismos, impulsar los mecanismos para los procesos de sostenimiento, de sostenibilidad de los medios de vida en su integralidad, todo, no solo en cuanto a los sistemas agroalimentarios, sino se incorporen también los territorios, los recursos, las fuentes de agua, etcétera, todo lo que tiene que ver con los procesos de adaptación y los procesos de resiliencia. Eso me parece como una prioridad clave, ¿no? Otro es este enfoque entre mercados y no mercados, también ese balance de incorporar el equilibrio en ese punto. Y bueno, lo de daños y pérdidas, que creo que es central para los pueblos indígenas. Yo incorporaría esos elementos más a estas prioridades que se han identificado el día de ayer, por favor. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Elvira. It's really very useful, and thank you really for highlighting the extreme weather events that are facing many of our countries, and then we need to focus and put priorities. So thank you so much for that. I'm seeing the 2 hands, but I assume that it was the old hand. So from the from the participant, I assume that Christelle and Damayanti, those are the old hand. So I'm giving the floor now to the members. Dali?
Thank you very much, Hindu. I just wanted to respond to a couple of the comments that have been made by the participants beyond the FWG. I think that the comment regarding language has been a persistent challenge, and at the outset of this session, it was raised again in terms of how we are inclusive and responsive to this issue. And I think that in the long run, something more concrete needs to be done in order to respond to this persistent challenge. The comment made about activity at the national level, I think it's necessary to acknowledge that even the difficulty that the FWG members have with really ensuring that state party members are engaged in our activities beyond the FWG members, the state party members of the FWG who are involved and in particular as co-leads, but casting the net further as far as other party members and their direct involvement in our discussions, because this is oftentimes the key. So I guess my respectful request is for those state party members and also Indigenous peoples who have examples of good outreach and collaboration to share those with us in order for us to potentially use them and to build upon them. The opportunity to do things at the domestic level, at the national level, is really necessary. And earlier there was reference to, for example, the regional intergovernmental organization, the Arctic Council. And this is one opportunity for more engagement at the national and domestic level, but I'm certain that there are additional opportunities out there. The comment about internet connectivity, this is something that plagues the Arctic and has for decades. Everybody's assumption in the modern world is that anyone can get on the internet. Well, that's absolutely not true in many of our communities. So it is a persistent challenge, not to mention the other infrastructure deficits that we face, but broadband width and connectivity is persistent, and how we overcome that to encourage more participation, especially in the midst of the pandemic and platforms going virtual. We really do need to overcome this particular issue as well, hence the important comments that Andrea made about in-person activities, especially when we're talking about really fundamental and significant issues like Indigenous knowledge. The final comment I want to make is that the message from Crystal and from other youth that it's important for us to remember as FWG members that when Crystal uses the term meaningful engagement, it means that we as FWG members, if we're going to be responsive to Indigenous youth, that we genuinely collaborate with them in the design of activities that are responsive to Indigenous youth. And this, I know that Indigenous people's representatives are acutely aware of activities or programs or mechanisms imposed upon us. Well, the same dynamic happens with youth. We don't want to develop responses to engage youth without their direct collaboration in designing those mechanisms or methods. So I think that direct collaboration with them goes far beyond consultation and is something that we're familiar with as Indigenous peoples who've been previously in the back of the room and not the drivers. And in this case, we have a unique opportunity to be the real drivers of something very unique or distinct to engaging our youth in the work. And I look forward to how that is elaborated upon in the second work plan, and just want to Sekpoyanak, to Crystal for sharing that, as well as the other youth that have spoken up. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Dali. I think you took all what people said there, and then this is really beautifully said. And of course, you take us also to the time, as you said, you talk about the importance of the language at the beginning. So I'm begging the interpreters if they can give us just a 5 minutes to close this session, because I know that you have only, we have only like 1 minute of your precious time to use. So if you agree with me, interpreters, please allow me just to give the floor to Grams, who is going to be very short, I'm sure, and then we can close today's agenda. Grams, vas-y, mon frère.
Yeah, merci. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. We'll be very rapid. Want to just kind of put my support for a lot of the contributions that I think Daly had summarized before I had tried to take the floor. I would like to say, just on the point that Andrea raised about how the platform and the FWG is framed, would be something that would be constructively done with the caucus. We spoke about what trust and inclusivity looks like, and this seems like a good opportunity to incorporate as part of the review a process that involves, the caucus-led work, including with a specific emphasis on Indigenous women and youth, and I think framing that out would be quite constructive, and something that I think the caucus has talked about to proceed alongside the work of the FWG and the review that they're doing. So wanted just to register that, and also just register the importance of ongoing interpretation and translation. And I know we spoke about and have raised kind of progressed significantly having interpretation during the meetings, but I think as Wanka and others shared, we want to make sure that that's translated also into documents, and how to participate in the process of the creation of those documents. And I shared earlier in the chat, it would be constructive to imagine new modalities of work that enable Indigenous caucus members in particular to participate with FWG members to lead specific activities that would help probably have that direct intervention. But I'll stop there. Miigwech, everyone. Hope you have a good evening, morning, or afternoon, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you for all the propositions, and that lead us to close the discussion on the agenda item 4. So I going to ask also my co-chair if he have anything to say in this one, and then we can close this agenda item 4. Thomas, do you have any word on this?
Thanks, Hindu. No, I think
do we lost Thomas? Oh, so sorry for that. So maybe electricity, battery, or whatever. So sorry, Thomas will come back, I'm sure. So to do not abuse to all your time from interpreters to participants. So this agenda item 4, it's closed. The next step in order, okay, you are back. Go ahead to your words. So sorry to lose you.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Just very briefly, I thank you to everyone for their contributions. I think it's given us a lot to consider, and a good framing for tomorrow's discussion on the next work plan. So thank you again. And yes, I think Daly summarized it very well. I learned many things from activity 4, but I also learned that Daly is a very tough act to follow. So I think I would just agree with your sentiments. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So the next step in this activity 4 will be to consider all the work that the Facilitative Working Group members are going to update or take over to the next work, or make the recommendation in all. So then I think all it's noted, and then we end this one. May I call on Coco to give us a quick housekeeping, and then we move. Coco, are you there?
Yes, and Hindu, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Hi, I've had some technical difficulties, so I'm connecting by video and then my phone. So everyone, it's just been terrific to listen to all of your active comments and thoughts. The housekeeping is as follows. Tomorrow, as you know, tomorrow and Thursday, what the FWG, together with all of you, will be turning its attention to is drafting the second 3-year work plan. And so just a few points that you might be wondering about. First of all, in the UNFCCC process, constituted bodies get mandates from the supreme body, which is for us in the UNFCCC, the Conference of the Parties. So the Conference of the Parties mandated the FWG to write a meeting report for this 5th meeting. And it also requested that the Secretariat attach that draft second 3-year work plan, which will be drafted tomorrow and Thursday, to that meeting report. And then what will happen is FWG will get that draft. A recommendation could be that FWG gives the Secretariat permission after listening to put that work plan together, and then you approve intersessionally. That means right after FWG, so that there's time to collate all of your ideas and put them in a maybe a table or something that's easy for you to take a look at. And then what happens is FWG will have a few weeks, and there have been discussions amongst FWG members to also consult regionally for a few weeks. And then by around the beginning of August, once FWG members have had a time to consult and provide refinements, then FWG would agree on that work plan. And it would then be cleaned up by the Secretariat and put as an annex to this meeting report. Will go to the editors, and then it will be considered at COP26 in Glasgow. So that's just a look on the formalities. Just to reassure everyone, the meeting's been recorded. We're listening very actively as a Secretariat. Additionally, so that's looking forward. I should have started with looking backwards. Let me go back to that. For all of the activities that you have heard about today and yesterday, FWG members will have a chance for those activities that have been completed and are just about to be complete, including activity 6, that's that set of recommendations. FWG members now have a chance, if they haven't done so already, to comment on those documents and then to agree. FWG agrees on things by consensus. And then the Secretariat can note all of those things in this meeting report. For things like activity 6 recommendations, if FWG wished, and if you agreed in time, meaning by around the beginning of August, those can also be annexed to the meeting report. But of course, we're completely in your hands, and you can also take more time if you wish to consider those. Other than that, we're listening to your ideas, and we will take guidance from the co-chairs on how to prepare everyone to work effectively in the breakout groups tomorrow. And that's it. Over to you, co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Coco. Thank you for all those clarification. If we may request just to have all the timeline that you set in written, and then people can remember about what we have to do by which time, and if we can adjust it or agree with it, so that will be more helpful for all the FWG members. Thank you. So then, Thank you, interpreters, for all your passion, for all your time. Thank you, my co-chairs, and thank you for the Facilitative Working Group members for the wonderful work that we really did today in all the activities, feeling proud of all what we did. And thank you for all the brothers, sisters, Indigenous peoples, and non-Indigenous peoples that attended this meeting. And we really looking forward for you, as you all requested that you wanted to have more participation, more inclusion. So we will have that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow in the small working group where all your ideas, you will just put them. So Tom and myself will be sure about how tomorrow will be run in very open and inclusive way. So, see you tomorrow.